Welcome to the Basics for Virtual Assistants podcast, your go-to destination for all things virtual assistant. I'm your host, Pol, and just 4 short years ago, I took that leap into the world of virtual assistants, and I've never looked back. Now it's my turn to help you take the same exciting path. Are you wanting to become a VA but no idea where to start, lost with how to price yourself or set yourself up for success? Well, look no further. As we explore this world together, I'll be sharing my experiences, insights, and all the valuable lessons I've learned along the way. So, get ready to explore the world of virtual assistants, uncover its limitless potential, and let me guide you on the path to becoming a successful virtual assistant. Your transformation into a skilled VA starts right here, right now. Welcome back to another episode. I actually had a totally different topic planned for today, but then I decided to pivot at the last minute and share with you why I batch my client work and how I batch my client work. My kids are going to be on school break in just over a week, and I know that I want to take time off and be as present with them as I can. So I set myself up for success by batching and pre-doing as much work as I can. But I actually batch the majority of my work every week anyway. So let's start with the most obvious question. What is batching? Now, for me, batching is taking similar tasks that take the same steps and doing them all at once. For example, I have a client who every single month I do her weekly newsletter. And so instead of doing it each week and having it set, what I do is as soon as she gives me the document at the beginning of the month or at the end of the previous month, I set aside time to complete that task for the whole entire month. So if she gives it to me in the last week of the month, I set aside a day just before the beginning of the month, and then I go into her program and I batch out every single email for that entire month, and then it's done. And I do this because one, I don't have to open the program 50 times to do the project. And two, I am doing the same thing. So you almost get into like a flow of doing the task. And I do this for a majority of tasks with my clients, but I just find that it helps to alleviate time wasting, and it just makes things simpler for me. I love batching. Once I found batching, it made a huge difference to me and the way I run my business. For me, batching gave me my time back. I was able to set aside time to do certain tasks in a bulk rather than doing them individually. I found that when I was doing, especially with emails, for example, when I was going in each week and doing them, I had to reopen the program, go to the right section, like set everything up. I had to re-find the document, open it up. I had to go in and find all the images I needed. Whereas if I was batching, I can look at the document and say, okay, I need these 6 images. Are they in the program that we use? No. Okay, I need to go and find them. I need to upload them. I need to name them. And then that part of the task is done. Okay, now that I've got that done, I open the document and I go in and I go, okay, we're sending an email out on this date for this reason, blah, 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 set it all up, go through, and like everything is just done. Like, okay, done. Next one, done. Next one, done. And I just found that I could get things done so much quicker when I batch them together than when I was going in and going, okay, I've opened the program. All right, where's this? Where's this image? Blah, blah, blah. Set ways that I do it, and my workflow, it just flows. What used to take me like half an hour to 45 minutes every single week now takes me maybe an hour and a half at the beginning of the month. And so not only am I saving myself time, but I am setting myself up for success. Batching has allowed me to better manage my client time. So I have a few clients on retainer, so I do the same tasks for them every single month. And so it just really allowed me to utilize that time better for my clients, but also utilize my own time better. I now have like an idea. Okay, the first week of the month, I do blog posts and I do weekly subscriber emails, and there's a few other tasks, and I do Pinterest. So I know in the first week of the month that I'm doing those tasks for my clients, which then allows me to better manage my other better manage other requests from my clients in the later weeks of the month. And I know that in the last week of the month, I have a massive task that I do for my client, and I do it every single month at the very end of the month, and I can set aside time for that, and I can batch it all out. And I just find batching allows me to be smarter with my time. I'm going to share with you my top tips for batching. My first tip is make sure that you have enough of that work to batch. If your client has not given you enough of that work to do, or like hasn't given you everything you need, there is no point starting to batch work unless you have everything you need. And I know that sounds so simple, but there is no point in saying, okay, I'm going to batch this task if you only have enough to do 1 week, because that's all one set of that task, because it's not really batching. It's just doing the task like you would normally do. So my first tip is make sure that you have enough to batch. Now, if you are working with a client and you want to start batching their work and you don't have enough at a time, have that discussion with them. Go to your client and say, I want to start batching this task, but from you, I need X, Y, Z to be able to do that. Majority of the time, the client is not going to have a problem with that. They're going to have to come up with that information anyway. So it'll probably be better for them in the long run if they have to come up with it before, like all at once, earlier in the month, than coming up with it each week anyway. It almost creates a task for them to batch, which will save them time. There are obviously times when you are not going to be able to ask for stuff in advance, and that's fine. But those tasks that you are repeatedly doing for your clients, try and organize with them to have that type of stuff in advance so that you can get it done. My second tip with batching is set a time frame for how long you are going to spend batching that task. Now, for me, this is specifically, I set time frames specifically or mainly on Pinterest, because I can so easily get caught up in creating Pinterest pins and scheduling them and lose half a day when I only planned on doing, an hour or 2 hours of that task. So it is really good, especially in the beginning, to set a time frame so that you don't end up going down a rabbit hole of doing that task and then actually losing time rather than saving yourself time. So, for example, with Pinterest, if I'm doing Pinterest for a client, I set 2 hours to do 2 weeks of Pinterest content, and I can do that pretty well within that time. So you need to make sure also that your time frame is realistic for you right now. You can adjust your time frames. When I first started doing Pinterest, it would take me probably 3 hours to do maybe a week's worth of. Be really considerate with your time frame and give yourself grace when you're first starting out. I think that sometimes as new VAs, we can be really hard on ourselves with how long tasks take us. But we just need to remember to give ourselves grace that we are learning, and we will all get there in our own time. The third tip that I'm going to share with you is stick with one client. I made the mistake in the beginning of thinking like, oh, it's the same task for like 2 different clients. I'll just batch them in the same time. Worst idea ever. If you are batching, stick with one client and don't batch the same type of content 2 clients in a row. So if you're doing, for example, if you're doing Pinterest for client A, I would not recommend then batching Pinterest for client B straight after Pinterest for client A. You need to give yourself a break for many reasons. Like give your brain a break between tasks and create some new momentum for that task. Otherwise, you can get really bored with it and you won't be giving your best work. And my top 3 tips for batching: also find a version of batching that works for you. When I first learned about batching, I read an article on it and I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. And the way that lady batched did not work for me, but I loved the concept of batching. And so I played around with it until I figured out which version of batching worked best for me. Batching won't work for everyone. I think that's a really important point to put out there. But the reason that batching works best for me, I think, is the type of work that I do and taking the time to put my sole focus on that task and not flick between tasks. I found sometimes that it was very easy to be working on one task and then quickly check emails so that I wasn't missing anything. And then you end up like not giving your best to a task. So sometimes batching is all about really just focusing on that task, turning everything else off, and working on just that task for your client and giving them your best and your all.
And that brings us to the end of another episode. I hope you've enjoyed diving into the fundamentals of the virtual assistant world with me today. If you found value in our discussion and want to connect further, remember you can join our community on Facebook. Just search the basics for virtual assistants and we can continue the conversation there. For more behind the scenes content, tips and updates, you can also find me on Instagram and TikTok. Follow me at the Basics for VAs podcast for bite-sized insight and a glimpse into the VA world. I'm thrilled you tuned in, and if you have any questions or specific topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, feel free to drop a message. Your feedback is invaluable. Until next time, keep thriving in your virtual assistant realm, and I'll catch you in the next episode.